Well, the race for the vacant 94th Assembly seat will be decided in a little more than 2 weeks.
Earlier today, we caught up with the candidates, John Lautz and Steve Doyle, to talk about the controversial budget repair bill. Today we're talking about the budget repair bill. It's been obviously a focus for the last 2 months here in Wisconsin. It was a pretty dramatic bill when it passed. I guess, John, we'll just start with you. How do you feel about the part of the budget repair bill that limits collective bargaining for state workers?
Well, I've had to learn quite a bit more about that, and again, it's been one of those issues that's really been divisive. On the other side, I look at the private sector and what has happened, what the private sector unions have done, what companies have had to do to keep things going. And it's my understanding, as I've been reading more on this, in the public sector, you almost get to the point of who's watching out for the taxpayer. The public sector unions negotiate with public sector people, be it a bureaucrat, a legislator, but we're all, once you're elected, now I'm a public employee. Who's really watching out for the taxpayer? Sometimes it almost gets to be kind of like the fox guarding the hen house. I'm not, and whatever one side gets, then the legislators and the people that were doing the bargaining on the other side get the same benefits. So how do you balance that? And that's something I need to really learn more about before I'm going to take an issue of whether we should give some of this back. At this point, the budget repair bill was the state's bleeding. We have to stop it. Now let's step back and take a look at what we've done.
Okay, Steve?
Well, as far as it went initially, where the governor was asking for concessions from public employees, that made sense, and the unions agreed to that. And I think that had he been in more of a cooperative mood in terms of doing this together rather than creating the animosity that ended up happening, he would have said at that point, we got what we needed for now, let's talk about the future of collective bargaining at a later point. But by pushing through the budget repair bill in the fashion that he did, it really proved divisive in our state. I mean, people are taking sides. There are really not a lot of people in the middle, and what we have is kind of a demonization of one group of people. My problem with the approach that he took and with the ultimate end result of the bill is actually approved by the courts is that it wasn't necessary. I mean, we have done exactly what he wanted to do at the county here in La Crosse for a long time. We went to our unions last fall and said, we want to have a one-year contract, 0 increase. And they weren't thrilled about that. Eventually, when the budget repair bill was introduced, they agreed to it and said, we'd be happy to talk about going forward also. And we worked out exactly the kind of plan that he wanted with the 0 increase for the next 2 years without destroying collective bargaining. It's a difference in mentality. Do you want to work with your employees or do you want to work against them? And being a private sector, small business person myself, I know that if I'm working with my employees, I'm going to get a lot more out of them than if I cram something down their throat. And so I think it's all attitude, and that's really what's the bad part about what's going on right now.
Would you be willing, if you were elected to the Assembly, to give some of those collective bargaining rights back?
Absolutely, because I don't think that they have worked against us. In La Crosse County, what we've done is work with our employees and with our unions on things like disciplinary matters, on things like vacation policies and so forth. It is not an adversarial relationship, and it doesn't have to be if you do it right. If you don't do it right, it can be a disaster, but that's whether you have unions or not. So I think they do serve an important role in the governmental process and in the private sector process. And I would certainly support restoring those rights so that we can have collective bargaining continue in Wisconsin.
John, same question. Would you be willing?
I'm not going to say up front that I would be willing to give that back. A good example of that is in the retirement plan. When that was set up, the law was set up that each part, the state and the employee, would put in 50% towards that retirement plan. It was through collective bargaining that got shifted to the point where the state was putting in well over 90% of it. And that's not right. And we can't expect the taxpayers, to me it's a classic example of as the collective bargaining went on, one side was not watching out for the taxpayer. What business in the private sector puts in 100% or almost 100% of the retirement benefits for their employees? It's normally a 50-50 split. And that's the way it was set up in the state, but through collective bargaining, the taxpayers lost that ability. Again, I go back to who's watching out for the taxpayer.
I'd like to respond to that if I could. And who put that into there was in most part the employers. Because as a person who's done collective bargaining representing the county in the past, I know that if you offer an employee a $100 increase in wages, they're going to get less than $100. It's going to cost us $106. They're going to get $94 because of the FICA and the other collateral costs that you have to pay for and that they have to pay for. If you offer it as a benefit, in other words, if we say, well, we'll pick up $100 more of your retirement, it costs us only $100. So it's actually cheaper for the taxpayers, for the employer, whether it's the county or the state or school district or whomever, to say, let's take a little bit less for wages and give you a little bit more for benefits. It was a smart thing to do, so I don't think there's anything dastardly about that at all. It was good thinking.
Well, if I could respond, Steve's correct that from an employer standpoint, it's a less expensive way to go. But as an employer, working with my employees and talking to other employers that are in the same types of situations, as you continue to give benefits, oftentimes the worker looks at what is in my paycheck at the end of the week. What is the net amount of money that I have to support my family on? And they kind of forget about what the benefits are costing the employer. And this is something we've done with our employees, and I know many other businesses that do, in small business like mine, that do the same thing. We sit with our employees and say, here are the dollars we have for wages towards you. For us to give you this benefit, it's going to cost us this amount. If we give it to you in wages, it costs us this amount. Here's what you'd have to make if you left employment with us. And what has happened on a state level, and I'm not going to say that's not, that we have not done a good job of it over here. We have treated our employees well, and we've negotiated this stuff. But on a state level, it has not been that way. Wages have continued to go up, and benefits have continued to go up to a point where these are tools that the governor is saying, and I need to research more on that before I would ever vote on the budget, but these are tools that the government would have to work with its unions to help the taxpayers reduce their costs. And that's where we are. We have to cut costs in the state.
Now, because of time constraints, we could only show you the first half of this interview, but the rest in full is available on our website.
And be sure to tune in every Monday on News 8 at 5 for our special candidate interviews. Next Monday, both candidates will be here live to talk about the upcoming budget battle.